Right, in this session, we're going to be setting up a knowledge base for our flower shop using ChromaDB, which is an open source vector database, and it can run locally. We're going to be using an off-the-shelf HuggingFace embedding model, and we're going to be using LlamaIndex to host it locally. What we're actually going to build is this addition to the front end where we can choose which part of the knowledge base we want to query. There'll be an FAQ part of the knowledge base and an inventory part of the knowledge base. The FAQ will be answering questions like, do you offer delivery? And we'll be able to see the relevant parts of the knowledge base. So this is an answer from a question, what are your delivery options? We offer same-day delivery. And we can also ask questions of the inventory. So this is for a product recommendation. And we can ask questions of this knowledge base, such as what bouquets are suitable for birthdays? And now we'll get answers that have come from a product recommendation list. Here's one, great for birthdays, ideal for birthdays. We'll later then use this in further episodes to be digested by our chatbot and provide a more suitable response to the user. I've got a couple of FAQ questions and product descriptions that I've prepared in advance. So I'm just going to copy them in so that we don't have to waste time, and I'll take you through what they look like. So in our FAQ, all these are question and answer pairs for our flower shop. So the questions are things like, what types of flowers do you offer? And there goes into description about the bouquets that are offered, how to place an order, what the delivery options are, international shipping, all sorts of things like that. And these are just some questions that I've generated through ChatGPT. Let's take a look at the inventory. We've got the product ID, the product name, quantity, price, the type of the product, whether it's a bouquet arrangement or vase, and then a description of the product, which kind of summarizes the colors, the size of it, and the price, and the type of occasions that it's suitable for. And this is what we're going to be using. This description is what we're going to be embedding, and the chatbot will be able to decide to write a summary of what the user wants to get back the most appropriate product recommendations. And similarly with the FAQ, we're going to embed the answer so that the chatbot can decide what question the user is asking, rephrase it, and then search through the knowledge base. So it can decide when to do the searching. And the reason why we're going for that strategy is because it gives the language model a bit more fine control and to make a decision about exactly what to search for. Right, so to get started, we're going to need a new file for our vector store. Let's call this vectorstore.py. And we're also going to need to install the new packages that we'll need to use. There are two new packages that we need to use. There's ChromaDB. Now I need to remember to add that to the requirements file again. And the other package is LlamaIndex, a module they've got specific for HuggingFace. There we go. Install that. And I'll add that to the requirements file as well. So now we've got all of the packages that we need. Let's hide the bottom. Now we're going to need to find a model to use for the embedding. OpenAI do offer an embedding model, but it doesn't actually perform that well compared to other open source embedding models. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look on HuggingFace, because there is a leaderboard here where you can decide on the task that you're trying to do, and then you can pick the most appropriate model based on your RAM and other constraints you might have. So I've sorted this by the retrieval, so we can have a look at the best current open source models for retrieval. And I want to pick one that I can run quite fast on my computer. And so the one I've gone for is this one, Stellar N 1.5 billion. And so we can get that model by copying the name of the path, and then we can set it here. Model name equals. What we're also going to need to do is, because we're going to use a local persistent vector database, we need to choose a path that we're going to use for that database. Great, there we go. Now we're going to need some objects in code to represent all the information stored within our inventory and FAQ. So let's create some Python classes to represent them. Now we'll need one for the FAQ, and they're just questions. Now that we've got our data representation set up, let's create a persistent Chroma database. To do that, we need to import it from ChromaDB, and then we can instantiate it. All it needs is the path. Chroma has these ideas of collections, which are separate parts of the database that can store information relating to one topic. And in our situation, we want separate collections for the products and separate collections for the question answers, so that when we're querying the product database, we're only getting products back, and when we're querying the question and answers database, we're only getting that back. But in Chroma land, these are called collections. And we can create a collection like so. Let's call it FAQ. That makes sense. In order to be able to use our custom embedding model that we want from HuggingFace, we need to pass in a custom embedding function to ChromaDB. And this will be the embedding function that it uses to embed the documents when it first inserts them into the database, but also it's used to then query the database. So when we pass in text, a question that we're using to retrieve similar questions, it will use that embedding function to embed that question and compare those vectors with what already exists in the database. So we can specify this. Comes with a custom class that we can extend and add on our new embedding function. So let's create our custom embedding class, which extends the embedding function. There's only two functions we'll have to override. In the init, we'll use this to download our model from HuggingFace, so we just need to know the model name and the call function. And what the arguments need to be for this call function are the list of input texts, which are a list of strings. And we're going to return an embeddings class, which is also provided by Chroma. So now we've set up our template, we now need to use LlamaIndex to download our model and create the embeddings from the texts. So we can import a custom class from LlamaIndex to download models from HuggingFace and to be able to use them locally. What we need to import is the HuggingFace embedding class. This class makes it really easy to download that model and run it on our local computer. So all we need to do is instantiate it with the name of our model. We put a default here, we don't want to do that. So instantiate it with the name of our model. Then during the call, we'll need to apply that embedding model to every single one of those input texts. And we do that with this getText embedding function. Let's just sort out this input as well. Lovely. Now let's just instantiate it. And we need to pass in our model name. Great. Now we have our client set up, our database client, and we've created a collection. Next, we need to actually add something to the collection so that we can query it. So we can do that with collection.add, and that takes in 3 arguments. It takes in our document, and this is what it's going to embed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to embed both the question and the answer, but as separate documents. So we're going to do 2 lists. The first, which is the questions, and the second, which is the answers. Next is the IDs. In this case, we're not actually going to use this at all, but we do have to put one, so we're just going to create some dummy ID. And it has to be a string. And lastly, it takes in the metadata, and this is metadata that's associated with the embeddings. So we're going to pass in the full question and answer pair for each of these. In this case, it's just the FAQs, which we've already loaded in. Now that we've loaded everything in, we can query it. And we can also specify the number of results that we want to return. And this will be the closest match that it can find, or the top 5 closest results in our case. I'm going to turn it into a function because then we can directly see the results from our existing front end. There we go. Lovely. Now I can import that from our front end. And each time the user hits enter, we can send a query. Great. And then I'm also going to add an assistant message to display them in chat. Okay, that's it. Let's give it a go. What's wrong? Key error answers in FAQ. I think it's just answer, isn't it? So let's get rid of that plural and give it a refresh. And there we go, it's all embedded. Let's give it a go with do offer delivery. Same day delivery. Can I customize my flowers? Yep, customization offers are available. So it's looking like it's doing an alright job. We just now need to tidy things up because this isn't particularly usable. And also we're adding the questions into our database every single time. So let's wrap this in a class so that if the data already exists in the database, we're not going to go and add it in again. I'm going to call this class flower shop vector store. Let's create an init. First, we're going to need to put our collection in there. So we're going to need our client, our embedding class, and our collection. Let's put them in. And now we're going to want to load data into that collection. So let's go with self. Oh, I missed out self in there. Self.load collection. And we're going to create this function now. with the FAQ file path. Great. Def load collection. And to load this in, we are going to need to do this. Let's move that into there. The loading and the adding to the collection. We're also going to need to pass in the collection that we're loading. Or maybe let's put this on the class itself. Self.FAQ collection. Now we can access that in here too. We need self there. Self.FAQ collection. That's looking pretty good. Now we just need to make sure that we're not reloading it each time. Because this is get or create, if there's already records in there, then we don't want to have to run this again. So if self.FAQ collection .count is equal to 0, then we want to load the collection. Otherwise, we've already got it because it's get or create. Finally, we want to add a query. So def query FAQs, and then we can return what we've got here. And this needs to be self.FAQ collection. Missing self here as well. Right, so that is a bit neater. We don't need that anymore. And let's store this at the top so that it matches our other meter names. Much better. We probably no longer need to pass this in either because we've got it as a kind of script variable. We'll just use it directly. There we go. So now we've got a single class that we can instantiate and it will load in the database. So now let's use this class instead from the front end. So instead we're going to import the vector store. We're going to create our vector store here. Equals flower shop vector store. There we go. Right, now let's go back to our front end and give it another go. There we have it. Do you offer delivery? So yes, they do offer delivery within the country. So that's working as before. Great, now the only remaining part is that we want to add in the inventory descriptions so that we can search for related products. So we can copy most of this code because it's all going to work the same way, just with the description instead of the questions and answers. So let's call this inventory collection. Nice. And this will be inventory. Then just the same way that we've checked the count here, we're going to do the same thing with inventory. And if it is 0 and it hasn't been instantiated, then we are going to need to load it in. And let's update this so it's load FAQ collection. And this one can be load inventory collection. Great. Let's copy and paste this. Rename. And we're going to need a new file path, aren't we? We've got our FAQ file path, and now we need an inventory file path. Inventory.json. Exactly what we want. Then we can load this in. But let's change this so that it's hard-coded because we don't need to pass it in each time. Let's update that. And this needs to be the FAQ file path. And this next one is the inventory file path. Let's rename this as well. Inventory. And now when we're adding it to the collection, because it's only the description this time and not the question and the answer, we can just add our description. Let's call this inventory. And this is going to be inventories even. And then for each inventory, we want the description. We don't want to double up the index this time. So we just want n here, not the 2 times. And this is going to be our inventories. But just the same as before, we want all of the inventories. Right, use the same collection. We actually need to insert it into a different collection. Now we can use the same code for querying the FAQs to query the inventories. We just need to change which collection we're querying. I've missed a self, there we go. Now that that's all set up, let's go to our front end and set up a radio button so we can pick which collection we want to query. So on our left-hand column, let's create a radio button. First argument for this is what's going to be displayed to the user. So which collection. And the second are the valid options. So we want FAQs and inventory. Very good. Now, when we are querying our FAQs, we want to choose which collection we query based on the radio button. So if collection choice is equal to FAQs, then do as we're doing right now. But otherwise, we want to use our new function to query the inventories. Very good. So now we should be able to run our GUI again. It's the first time we've run it, so it'll take a little while whilst it calculates the embeddings for all of the descriptions. Right, now that it's loaded, let's select inventory and let's ask it a question. So we want a bokeh recommendation now. What bouquets are best for birthdays? And this is the information that eventually is going to be provided to our chatbot. So it'll have to use this information to put together a reasonable response. Bright sunflowers, great for birthdays. Another one, ideal for birthdays and baby showers, birthday gifts. So it's done a pretty good job. The language model will then be able to digest these results and determine which ones are appropriate to present to the user. That's what we've got for this episode. We've set up a vector store to be able to query frequently asked questions for our flower store and to ask about product recommendations. And these two bits of information are going to go together into our customer service chatbot. And so it will be able to decide when it wants to ask for a recommendation for a product and when it wants to ask for general questions about the service provided by the flower shop. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode, which will be on setting up LangGraph to use our vector store.